Good evening. Hello, welcome. Thanks for coming in, stopping in. I'm gonna get officially started in about 8 minutes, but I'm always here a little early, so just about ready to get this thing kicked off. I'm in a good mood, but my stomach is killing me. I'm having some kind of issue, so hopefully I can grind through this for the next hour with my stomach in knots for some reason. Not in knots, but I'm having some kind of stomach issue. Ugh. But I'm in a relatively good mood, so let's counter that with that. And thanks for the people who are joining in and following the channel and all those good things. Got a lot of new followers recently, more on the Bryan Kohberger stuff. We started covering Luigi Mangione, but lately with the slowdown in that case, we've been talking a bit more about Kohberger and getting back into that from 2 years ago. So that's been our new obsession while we're waiting for something new from the Luigi situation. However, Wednesdays and Friday nights, I tend to do questions and answers, open forum. So if you've got questions and something on your mind, now is a good time, or at least at 6 o'clock when we officially get started. Whenever, now, whatever, or then, we will we'll get into questions and answers, and if not, I'll ramble about what's going on in my world. Since the last time I was doing the live last Friday, and thanks for the likes to help us get that started. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. That helps out a lot, I think. So, yeah, lots going on in the research world. Lots going on behind the scenes in our account. My buddy hasn't confirmed, but my partner in this channel was going to make a Devil's Advocates 2 account so that we can have a backup account if anything happens, but also so that he can do lives with me. His other TikTok account that he's had for years and hasn't posted on for a long time, every time he goes live with me, he gets flagged, or I get flagged saying there's something suspicious about him. And so I have to approve him every time. And he's like, you know what, forget this. I'm just going to start a new account. We'll call it Devil's Advocates 2. It'll be our backup account. And if we can slowly get people following that second account, then when we go live together, it'll be Devil's Advocates and Devil's Advocates 2. And then people will be following hopefully the backup account in case something happens. Weird things in TikTok that you can get one account shut down and have another account going. I think that's a little bizarre, but it'll give us the dual ability to go live together. I start yawning every time I do the live. It's a weird thing. So anyway, so yeah, that's what we're working on there. We got a new video format that we've laid out. My buddy, who's a marketing guy, he laid out a new video format for our YouTube long form videos. A lot of what is on my mind, I don't know if I can talk about tonight because it's TikTok is more restrictive on what you can't say. What I found recently, well, I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that for my monologue coming up at 6. I'll tell you some things that I found about differences between YouTube and TikTok, what can and can't be said, and some of the criticism that I have fallen under this week as I've started to dive into the Kohberger story. So, again, thanks so much for helping us out with the likes and getting that going. That's super appreciative. We'll see how it goes tonight, but it always helps to get some traction going, and hopefully more people will come in. It's always easier to have high energy when there's more people listening. Oh, good Lord, those yawns kill me. I don't know what it is. Is it stress? I mean, I'm a bit of an introvert, actually, despite the fact that I go on camera all the time. I'm a bit of an introvert, so maybe there's a stress level of getting behind the camera that's presenting as yawning. It's weird. Gus, welcome. Gus is a regular. There's probably other people here who are regulars. Some new names, I think, that I've seen who've just started following recently. So hopefully you can get to know a little bit about me as a person. Hello, Gus. And hopefully we can get to know each other a little bit better and maybe hammer out what what my take is and what I do and why I do it. And maybe I'll zip up this shirt so it doesn't look like I'm trying to go all 70s, whatever the hell we can't say on TikTok. So yeah, let's just chill for 3 minutes, and then I'll get into a more formal monologue. I'll keep yawning. Frick, it's been a long day. Did you see that they delayed Luigi's February 17th? Yeah, I saw someone talking about that, and here's what's weird about that, Gus. I have all kinds of alerts on my phone for breaking news when it comes into Luigi, and I haven't seen that on the breaking news yet, but I did see somebody report in a Discord channel that I belong in that they delayed till March 19th or something like that. So my timeline on my websites hasn't been updated. I haven't confirmed that date, but now that you're saying as well that they have delayed it, it appears that they have indeed delayed it, which I find interesting in itself. And I guess I'm gonna have to think about how I feel about that. What does it mean in the case? Again, off the top of my head, the defense has a right to a speedy trial, but they're obviously waiving their right to a speedy trial and allowing more time. So the question becomes one of why. Like, it would, under normal circumstances, like for example, in the O.J. Simpson case, his lawyers forced the court to keep moving in a fast thing and not waiving the right to a speedy trial. Why? Because they know that if the prosecution is forced to speed things up, they'll make mistakes. And that was the strategy. So why Luigi's lawyer is not doing the same thing is curious. I don't know if it means anything in particular, but I would have expected her to force their hand to move fast and put all their ducks in a row faster than they want to. Giving them time doesn't seem to bode well for your defense, in my opinion, but who knows? Yeah, and I think people have speculated that. Does that mean that the prosecution wants more time to put their ducks in a row because they're having a hard time? I don't know. What we do is we do ask questions and speculate, so it's not wrong to ask those questions for sure. Karen Agnifilo is willing to allow it because it makes them look weaker, the prosecution. Yeah, it perhaps does. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. It's 6 o'clock, by the way, so we can more formally get into an official start. So let's start with a little bit about myself, because we've got new people who are following for the first time who don't know a whole lot about me and my take. We started the Devil's Advocates. I'll try to be relatively brief. We started the Devil's Advocates as a blog 12, 13 years ago with the shooting in Aurora, Colorado. We got hot and heavy into the world of true crime and conspiracy theory. Weird shit started happening in my life. Frankly, I got nervous and I pulled the plug on the project after probably, I don't know how long we were at it, 6 months or less. And 12 years later, as I was getting ready to retire and kind of do something full time, my buddy said, man, we should fire up the Devil's Advocates again. So here we are on round 2, when Luigi Mangione fell into our lap as the hot story of the day, and we definitely, my partner and I had thoughts on Luigi Mangione and whether that was a professional hit, whether there were other people involved, whether or not it was just a social commentary on a corrupt healthcare system. Is Luigi Mangione a hero for the people, or a horrible person, vigilante who we don't appreciate that? How do people feel about it? This is what we started to cover. My series that I started out with on the interesting Easter eggs that appeared that Luigi Mangione, or we don't know that Luigi Mangione is the suspect. That's what the authorities tell us. But the Easter eggs that were left, like the backpack full of Monopoly money, the 286 on Luigi Mangione's posts on Twitter and or X, and the whole Pokemon 286 number, all of this stuff, the denial of claims number 286, all that stuff was like, wow, there's something going on here. the Easter eggs thing indicated to me that there was something deeper going on. And again, I postulated just simply from a look of Luigi Mangione on his perp walk and courtroom appearances, there was a smugness on his face, a confidence on his face that made me think, does he know something that we all don't know right now? Is there a bigger game afoot, so to speak, is what I was saying. So that was how we got started on the channel. And then again, as things started to slow down a bit in that world, and we covered a lot of what we could cover. And welcome, Character Analysis. Welcome back for coming in. Thank you so much for dropping in. But as things started to slow down, and my buddy was saying, we need to cover more than Luigi Mangione because Luigi Mangione's not an everyday thing. We basically started to get back into the Kohberger story because Bryan Kohberger and the Idaho 4 murders, which are 2 years old, is new in the news again because of motions that the defense made and the rulings that are being discussed right now and all those things. So we started to dive back into that, and that's been my obsession the past few days, has been getting my head wrapped back around that case and finding where new leads are and things to go down. That's led to a lot of new followers in that space, but also coming under criticism about being true crime, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that now. Is just, when we were looking into Kohberger, people started to say things about how irresponsible it is to ask questions about other individuals. People who have suspicious ties to the victims, suspicious ties potentially to the suspect, sketchy law enforcement leads, things like this. And so as we started to look into that and ask questions, I came into a little bit of flack from some of the community with the whole, oh, here we go again, another asshole TikToker who thinks he's a detective, and shame on you for mentioning names and talking about people and all of those things. And so I have mixed emotions about those things. I don't know if you remember the case of Smart. What was her name? That is like a decade something old case in California, and the recent conviction of a cold case in a murder of a college student, right? And they just convicted the guy recently. We covered that story and we followed, well, we didn't cover, sorry, we weren't covering that as Devil's Advocates, but I was watching that case, and a podcaster who Your Own Backyard was the podcast. And that podcaster was just a guy kind of like me who lived in the area and was fascinated by the story, much like I'm fascinated with Kohberger's story. And his podcast, in my opinion, broke that case wide open and led to the arrest and conviction of the lead suspect that law enforcement had not been able to seal the deal on for over a decade. And this podcaster, just a random guy asking questions, asked enough right questions that the case broke wide open. And they made the arrest, and that guy is now in jail. And that happened because of a true crimer, right? And he was also getting people saying the same kind of thing to him. Shame on you for bringing this up again and dragging the family back through something. Just let it go. You're accusing an innocent man who just was awkward at the time, who ended up being the killer, and was convicted in court for it. Gosh, it's so funny that his name and all those things are slipping my mind. It was such an obsession for my wife. She was a big true crime person at the time, and we were both just glued to Your Own Backyard's podcast. And I was telling her at the time that I love the fact that this guy broke this case. So there's mixed feelings about the whole being accused of being a horrible person because. Yeah, give me a second here, character, and I'll bring you up on some Kohberger stuff if you got some time. But let me finish my little monologue, and then I'll throw you up here. So I have mixed emotions about it because, like I said, people accuse me of horrible things. But again, true crimers have broken many cases because they'll ask questions that the media won't ask. They've asked questions that law enforcement didn't follow up on. They bring questions about why law enforcement didn't follow up on things, and so they'll go follow up on it. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden law enforcement's interested again because the true crimers can ask questions law enforcement's not even allowed to ask. So there's this weird symbiotic relationship where you get shamed on one hand for asking questions, but then the true crimers can actually break stories. Yeah, let's bring character up here. Hold on. She may have some thoughts about that as well.
Hi,
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. I do have a thought on that because one of my good friends is Body Movement from the Netflix show Don't F with Cats.
Yeah?
And I don't know, do you know the case that she was involved with?
No.
This is a case of a guy was online and he was unaliving kittens. I mean, in
Oh yeah,
really
yeah.
horrific ways.
Yeah.
And this group like kind of built on Facebook, I believe, and they started analyzing everything in his room. And they found a vacuum cleaner. Well, where's that vacuum cleaner sold? Is that North America? Where is that? And they were able to trace that guy down and get his identity.
I remember that a
So
little bit now, yeah.
so when people say things like, oh, armchair detectives, the reason why people, I think, they get a bad name is when they go real life,
Yeah.
right? Like when they cross that line.
Yeah.
But there's so much, like a lot of, I just did a post on sort of what they call overwhelming the system, meaning it was in reference to Luigi. So I won't go too deep into it, but all those times that he was caught on camera where we were like, what was he thinking?
Yeah.
She's the faculty advisor at Harvard for the Homeland Security program, and she said, if you can't avoid the surveillance, overwhelm it,
Yeah.
meaning give them so many instances of you being on camera and throw out some red herrings and do little things like change into a different outfit, all these little things. Because we were like, why did he go all the way up there and then leave the bus station and go to get caught on camera?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, let's circle back to that maybe in a little bit here.
Yeah.
I wanted to answer Crazy's thing because Crazy in the chat had said that he or she hadn't been up on the Kohberger case in a long time and wanted to know what happened. So I was going to give a brief like where we're at the moment kind of thing, just to answer that question before it gets buried and they don't get their answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the most recent thing in the Kohberger case, I think, is that the defense recently had a Franks hearing in which they were asking for a lot of evidence to be tossed out of the case, and they had really good points, in my opinion, really good points. And to summarize where we're at the moment, and we can go over some of the points that they made. The judge has not, as far as I have seen, has not made a ruling on it yet. So the request has been made, a formal hearing was given, the complaint was raised, and the judge is reviewing it. As an aside, I think the points that the defense made were excellent. People have described it in the media as being a Hail Mary with no chance of succeeding. I think the issues that were raised were legitimate and real problems. Having said that, looking at the judge's face while it was being made, it looked like the judge gave zero shits. I doubt the judge is going to approve any of the stuff being tossed out because it just seemed like the judge had no mood to even listen to it. But that's my personal opinion, looking at his face. But we'll see. They were legitimate gripes. If you want to hear what those gripes are, we'll cover that. If not, we can move on. They're trying to suppress almost all the But like I said, I feel like the reasons and the grounds in which they're trying to say things are legitimate problems. But I don't suspect that the judge is going to toss it. So therefore, my guess is that it's going to have to be argued in court. In other words, the same complaints will come up in court. It's just going to have the jury hear what the defense's complaints were, because I think it's going to be allowed in. What are your thoughts on that character? Do you think that's going to happen or
Uh,
what?
I don't think he's going to allow anything to be thrown out. And I agree with you. The look on his face the whole time she was talking, he just looked annoyed that he even had to be there.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I gathered too, which I think is, frankly, I think it's a little unprofessional. He should be impartial, not like clearly like I'm pissed off that you're asking for this kind of thing. But he looked annoyed, in my opinion. But it is what it is, and like I said, I think it'll come into court and it'll have to be fought there. Um, yeah, so the major complaints, and thank you by the way for the gifts and the support and everything that's happening. We got a nice good following and a nice good likes thing, so everything's awesome. Thank you so much for helping us out. The major complaints that I remember, and maybe character can point out which ones I've missed. There was an interesting argument that the defense made that I believe, I can't remember which law enforcement agency they said it was, purposely basically misused and lied about the position of Kohberger's car and the travel direction that he was going at the time that he pinged the cell phone tower, saying that he was heading to Moscow for the murders, when in reality, defense said he was heading the opposite direction down to a park. That was interesting that she claimed that there was proof that his car was going in the opposite direction, and that they just simply altered the timeline to make it look like he was going in a different direction to put him where they needed to put him. That's really interesting stuff. I haven't dove into the tower information myself to prove whether I feel like the car was really going in the opposite direction. It's interesting to me. That was one of the big ones. Another big one was and from what I understand, and again, characters follows this case, so maybe she can clarify whether I'm wrong about this. The blood of two unidentified males were found at the crime scene. One on a handrail and one inside of a glove, of all things, outside the front of the home. What was worse than the fact that they can't identify the blood samples of these two males was that I understand they basically didn't put that into discovery. In other words, the defense not too long ago found out about these blood samples because they just failed to mention it to the defense. That is a major effing problem in my opinion.
Hold on. That's not what happened.
Okay, so
we've known about those unidentified male DNA almost for 2 years now. They came out in a court document in June 2023. One was a glove, and two other were in the house, I believe. So we've known about that. That is not new information.
So I believe you. What I need to do is I need to find what I saw, because it seemed like Ann Taylor herself had indicated that there was some part of basically them not finding about it at some point in it. So maybe it was a long time ago. Maybe it was during the initial processing. I don't know. So I need to find that, because I'm certain I read that something to that effect, but I need to find out what it is now, because if it's been known for a long time, it's not a recent discovery, obviously. So that's good to know.
I think what she might be arguing is, why weren't those, like, the names, they couldn't upload it to CODIS because there wasn't, like, they couldn't identify, there wasn't enough to identify. And so just because there were other instances of DNA does not mean it was a different person. What Ann Taylor does exceptionally well is manipulate words to her advantage, so that she's not lying, but she's leading you. Because if you look in some of the court documents, it says, the sheath was placed.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
She is very intentional with her wording.
Right.
So we don't know that it was actually different men. It could have still been Kohbergers or the suspects.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, I don't want to argue with you, but I don't know how that can be. Like, literally they're claiming that they've got a 99.999% match on touch DNA on a sheath, but they can't match the blood samples. Like, I don't even understand how that would be possible. to not be able to match him on a blood sample, which is a lot more DNA evidence than the touch DNA, which I think they said was about the size of a speck of dust or something on the sheath. So I don't even know how they would not be able to do that. In fact, one of the things that bothers me is the fact that they can't identify a means that they've tested it and they can't place it. Otherwise, they would have used it. So I just don't know. So that's a question.
If it's degraded or if it's commingled, they're not going to be able to use it.
Right.
Like the one found outside, I guarantee that was degraded. I mean, it all depends on the environment, right? Because DNA can last a really long time depending on how it's preserved.
Well, so and that's another thing. Like somebody said on a comment on my feed somewhere on one of my videos that the fact that they can't identify something means that they're old blood samples that have been degraded. And I'm like, that's not necessarily what it means. If a person's not in the database, there's going to be no hit. It doesn't mean that it has to be old, degraded, too old to get. It doesn't mean that. So it doesn't not mean it either. But what I'm saying is you can't say with certainty that because they couldn't identify the sample owner, that means it was so old or whatever. It means there wasn't a hit. So I don't know.
Correct. Yeah. You're right.
So there's that. There was another interesting tidbit. There was a third point that I found really interesting on the defense. Oh, so the submitting of the DNA itself. So one of the arguments is that law enforcement submitted to two ancestry type databases to get their match, both of which strictly forbid law enforcement from using those databases for that purpose. Now, as I will tell you, here's why I believe law enforcement is forbidden from using those databases, because it's not reliable enough to use in a court of law kind of thing. So they basically are saying you can't use this as definitive kind of stuff and put a number on it in a court of law because it's not good enough. And so for them to use it and then put a number out there like 99.99999% prejudices everyone to say there's no way it's anybody else. But if the databases they use to make that connection specifically forbid law enforcement from using it, it may be because they inaccurately give those kind of numbers, which is misleading and shouldn't be used for law enforcement purposes. So that's an interesting take again about, it's not, because people have said, well, they didn't collect the DNA illegally. Correct. They didn't collect the DNA illegally. The argument is where they used to get their match, what the source they used. So as far as I understand, it's not the collection of the DNA that was the problem. It was how they made their match, how they made their connection, which was a large part of why they made the arrest. So one would argue if you only made the arrest because you inaccurately made an identification, then you should throw out the arrest. Like the arrest shouldn't have happened. You incorrectly arrested somebody on information that was not accurate. But I don't think it's going to stand up. Again, the judge didn't seem to really care about that argument at all. Let's see, what else? Did I answer all the questions about what came up in that Franks hearing? I think those were the major ones. And again, they're legitimate questions in my opinion. If it's provable that the car was going in a different direction or that there was any kind of shenanigans going on to place the car where it was at by not pointing out the exact time markers or any of that kind of shenanigans, that's a major problem that they will have. If it turns out that the blood samples were tested and there just isn't anybody in the database and they just happen to use or they used information from a source that it forbids law enforcement from using it because it's not that as accurate as they say it is, that would be a problem. So they're legitimate things. But again, for the record, we're waiting for the judge to make a ruling on it. I don't suspect he's going to toss any of that out. I think it's all going to come into court. And then I am assuming Ann Taylor will have the ability to bring all that up in front of the jury and have them make an opinion about whether or not it should have been admitted or not. Any other questions, comments? We were talking about the Bryan Kohberger case, the Idaho 4 murders from November 13th, 2022, which the trial is, I think, set for August of this year in Boise, Idaho. They moved the venue to Boise. I'm considering, depending on what happens in this case, going down to Boise and being there for part of it, kind of like the guy from Your Own Backyard did, because he was he inspired me that, hey, if these are open to the public, maybe I can go sit in there and make my own opinion instead of reading everybody else's opinion and commenting all the time. So we'll see. It's quite a drive for me, but it is within driving distance. So there's that. Yeah. So, any other questions? Either Luigi, Kohberger, anybody that's got questions about videos that I've had. I've had some people that have told me my videos are shit, so we can talk about that if you're one of those people, although you're probably not going to be sitting in my live if you think all my stuff is shit. We can talk about that. We can talk about the people that have been trying to reach out to get on the show or the lives with me. But, I mean, I guess as another side tangent, that's one of the problems that I find and I don't know that this is true, but there feels like a lot of people have been covering some of these stories, like Kohberger in particular, for a long time. So I imagine there's a bit of resentment on their part that I'm some new guy coming in and they're like, who the F are you? I've been doing this for 2 years. You're not going to come in here and talk about something when I've been covering it for 2 years kind of thing. So I don't know if there's that resistance. When I reach out to some people, they're kind of, they just blow me off and don't want to talk to me. And maybe it's that. Maybe it's like, I'm covering this thing for 2 years. I don't need to talk to you, which I just want them on the show to give their opinions. Cause like, I think some of them are super interesting. Like Jay Embry, for example, is super interesting in some ways. So.
I think a lot of creators have just they're just kind of burnt out on Idaho. We don't have any new information. And because of this whole Frank's hearing thing, now the same old stuff is being regurgitated and recycled and brought up again. And, you know, I do, this has just been, this case has been a nightmare on this app.
Yeah.
Because there was a troll that inserted themselves, said that they were next door the night of the crime, that the next morning he went over to the King Roadhouse and there were, you know, Dylan and Bethany and Emma Bailey was her name, and Demetrius something, and Dylan's boyfriend Quinn. They were all out in the backyard smoking or something.
Right.
And this took off. Like, people really believed this.
Right.
And then the guy was exposed as a troll. Like, this is something he does on this app. He jumps from community to community. And because of that, I think we were all just so, you know, I think a lot of people are very hesitant to go backwards.
Yeah. Because
the case was just, Cav, I don't know who you're talking about. If you're talking about Dot, they identify as male. But yeah, it's just, we talked about it for so long. And so when someone new comes in, we're like, oh God, we've already covered this, you know? And yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And that's fair. I mean, and I think that's fair. I think there's a large portion of people who, for them it's new, you know. So I think for some people it's new, and I understand the people who've been covering it for 2 years are like, I don't want to hear the same shit I've been hearing for 2 years. In fact, that was one of the comments I had on my thing, like, oh my God, you're still talking about this, and I'm like, I haven't been talking about it at all. It's new for me because I'm getting back into the thing, and some of these questions are the first time I've heard it. And when I get down a rabbit hole of my own, and then I realize that that's something people have looked into 2 years ago as well, I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that when the first time I was looking into it. So for me, it's new. And I feel like there's a portion of people who it will be new for as well. So I'm going to continue to do my thing, but I understand maybe the people who've been at it for years are like, I don't want to rehash what is old news. And that's fair.
Yeah. You know, I also think that the Luigi case, it opened the door to a lot of people who've never done case talk or who have never looked into cases. And so I think it's sort of a natural progression to be like, okay, there's no news on Luigi right now. Let's go over to Idaho.
Yeah.
Because Idaho is, especially for a newbie, that case is fascinating.
It is. It is. And it's one of those cases that when you first look at it, you think it's an open and shut door until you start getting into the weeds and you're like, what? That's the thing. When you start asking questions, it gets super weird. It gets really weird. By the way, crazy, yes, I did hear about the new deadline for Luigi. I think it's March 19th, I think it was. I just heard about it a couple times today. It's so weird. I've got alerts set up on my phone to get breaking news on several stories that I'm following, including Luigi. And I did not see this on my phone's been going off today on alerts. I did not see any of that on my alerts. Super weird. I saw it on Discord. I had somebody ask me about it here tonight, and I have you mentioning it tonight. So apparently it's out there and it has been moved, but I have not even had a chance to find the news source and put it on my website yet. So that was pretty. It's weird when like I'm trying to stay up on breaking news and it breaks before breaking news. So I just missed it somehow. The latest things I saw, my alerts have all been about the $300,000 that's been raised for Luigi, and that's like constantly my phone goes off with that, and I'm like, that's not new news. But I get it all the time. Another 5 sources are mentioning the $300,000 in donations for Luigi.
You know, on the subject of that, you know, to think about what that money could do for people who, you know, can't afford medication because their insurance doesn't cover it, or to help them pay off some debt because their insurance didn't cover it. Like, there's sort of a bit of an irony here that money isn't going to the people who need the money, it's going to the rich kid.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I mean, it's hard because, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but this is the case with everything, right? I mean, people go out and buy $6 coffees at the coffee shop, and they could be spending that money in better ways to help people instead of just buying a coffee at Starbucks. Like, where do you draw the line? People are going to put their money where they want to put their money. And you're right. There's better uses of the money, perhaps, especially maybe in Luigi's case, who probably isn't having problems funding his case. He doesn't probably need $300,000 of donations. But the point being is, like, people just put their money where they want to put their money, and it's, you know, where do you draw the line? Like, I mean, I get it. I get the argument, but it's like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if
I do. Absolutely. Like, they're going to, exactly. You can't, exactly. It's just, you know, the whole point of, like, the message, the conversation of this case was how corrupt and broken our healthcare system is.
Right.
And how it's the rich people getting richer.
Yeah, and that's what I want. I want the narrative to be that. I want the narrative to be about the corruption. I want the narrative to be. By the way, did you see? I didn't know the news source. Boing Boing was the news source. I don't even know if they're legitimate or whatever because I never heard of it. They reported that United Healthcare has hired a defamation specialist to try to help all the counteracting of people saying that they're denying claims and killing people, and they're trying to go after to sue people for besmirching United Healthcare's name. I don't know if that's legitimate or not. I saw one.
I did hear that.
Yeah.
I did hear that. Listen, I just put up a video tonight. It was up for maybe 5 minutes, and it was taken down for violent extremism.
Yeah. See?
And that's not even an option. Like, you have to write that in.
Yeah, I got one video pulled for. I got one video for inciting violence, and it wasn't inciting violence. And then they changed it to PII, which, by the way, I mentioned at the top of the hour that I wanted to mention a difference between YouTube and TikTok that came up when my wife we were researching together, and she saw this article shaming people like us in the community, saying, shame on internet sleuths, you're ruining people's lives and you're driving people nuts with your wild speculations and you're hurting people and you should be ashamed of yourself. Stop it. Which also the article said, in some cases, true crime has helped solve cases. But what was interesting about it is there was a line in there that said that YouTube has made a stand that they will not take down videos for defamation claims because YouTube has decided that they are not the arbiter of deciding what's true or factual about people's statements. Now, TikTok, they'll take your video down if somebody in the family says, that guy talked about my brother, take it down. And they'll immediately take it down and they'll say, yep, you used identify. And they don't look into it. They don't care. They'll just take it down. Knee-jerk reaction. YouTube apparently has specifically stated they will not pull videos for defamation claims because they're not the ones who are deciding whether or not what you're saying is true or not. So they leave it up. So this is why I did a video on YouTube long form called Too Hot for TikTok, because I named names of people in my research that I can't name here. Because if I say the name, somebody will report me for shaming somebody's brother, sister, daughter, son, and I'll get the video pulled because somebody was offended. And apparently that's not going to happen at YouTube. So that's it. But
Well, you I think the thing to understand is, like, once the narrative is out there and it's out of your control, it's out of your control.
yeah,
And especially people on this app, they will take stuff real life. Like, they will call people's jobs.
yeah,
They will call people's family members. You know, they will they'll go far to try and, get the story, or, find the information. And, it's sort of like like we have sort of this unwritten rule in the true crime community that we don't go real life. We don't go calling jobs. You know what I mean? We don't try to, like, we don't go messing with somebody's livelihood.
right.
We just don't do that.
And that's the difficulty. So let's talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind. That's the difficulty. So when I was researching, like I said, the Colorado shootings, there were people who were calling up family members who were in the theater, victims that survived, right? And then I was getting shamed for, you effing researchers calling people up and bugging the family. I said, I never called a single person, and nor would I. Like, I am not that guy. But you're lumping me in with the a-holes that'll call up and say, at Sandy Hook, your kid was never really there. That never happened, right? And then they associate every true crime person as doing that. That is not the case. Some of us do armchair research in the internet and leave people alone and don't go calling people and accusing people of things and saying weird shit. But there does come this gray area. For example, and I don't want to say names, but when I'm doing research, I'm doing public records searches from my computer, and in public record searches, I can put individuals by name in certain cities and certain states on certain dates, because when they bought their house and when they sold their house is listed publicly, what the name was, when they bought the house, where they live. Okay, and so that's public information. But if I say to somebody, I know person X lived at this residence at the same time Bryan Kohberger lived at this residence, people will say, shame on you. How dare you say that? I'm like, it's public information. Is it okay if Fox reports it? Then I can repeat it because Fox said it? Like, where do we draw the line when I'm allowed to talk about it? Do I have to wait for mainstream media to say it first and then I can repeat it? Or can I be the person who points out something that mainstream media is not covering? And it's tough. Like, I have to ask myself those questions all the time. How much do I say when it's just public records? I'm not calling it up anybody and not hassling anybody. I'm just doing internet research that anyone can do, and I can show receipts. I can be like, if you want to see it, here's where it's at. If you want to argue that that's not really where they're living because it's just the date of a house purchase, fine. Maybe they weren't living there, but I can at least prove to you that they bought the house in that name because that's where it's listed on public record. So I don't know to this day where I feel comfortable with that yet, but
I think you're talking about somebody who's got the same initials as the current suspect. Yes?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
So
go ahead.
I'll just cover that briefly. So I, oh my gosh, let me cover this briefly. So when I looked, so somebody had mentioned, and I forgot about it until someone mentioned it recently in a video of mine. Hey, how come you're not talking about this other guy who was shot and killed by SWAT in Pullman a month later? And I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remembered that was a thing. I didn't know that there was any connection or alleged connection or whatever. And in fact, when I looked into it with the eyes of a completely unrelated thing, but isn't it interesting that it happened, whatever. Then the more I looked into it, the weirder it got. I mean, really weird. Such as, for example, this person's mother lives in Lewiston, Idaho. Kohberger allegedly made a trip down to Lewiston, Idaho the day of the murders, which was just weird. Then I find out that his mother not only lives in Idaho now and lived there at the time that the murders happened, but his mother also lived in Pennsylvania at the same exact time that Bryan Kohberger was in Pennsylvania going to school. My friend would point out, Pennsylvania is a big place. That doesn't mean anything. Yes, they were on his mother was on the opposite side of the state as Kohberger, but I never thought in a million years you could put the two of them in the same state back then. And then you find out that this guy's best friend also lives in Pennsylvania. Then you find out that Kohberger's sister played in a horror film, and they were all big horror movie films. All of this is documented from their own mouth. Like, this guy literally has come on YouTube and said, hey, just because I'm huge into horror films doesn't make me a killer, doesn't make my friend a killer. So you have all these weird coincidences. So again, when I'm talking, I say to myself, I'm a kind of person who doesn't think coincidences are always coincidences. In fact, the more weird coincidences you have, the more like, holy shit, like, how is that just a coincidence? And so I asked the question, is this really just a coincidence? My friend who's a partner with me in this endeavor, he gets nervous about that. He's like, dude, there's Pennsylvania is a huge place. You can't say because they were made, and I can't even place him in Pennsylvania, although several people have reached out to me telling me that he definitely, this person who has the same initials as Bryan Kohberger, definitely was in Pennsylvania at the same time that Bryan Kohberger was. I don't know that's true. I know his mom was. I know his best friend was. Chances are good that he was as well. But I haven't been able to put him there. But again, when I'm talking about that stuff, it makes me nervous about how far do you go making those, hey, isn't it a weird coincidence that Kohberger's sister was in a horror film, that these men were big horror movie buffs, that the allegations are that Bryan Kohberger looked up to this guy, that they know each other. I can't prove that at all. I can't prove they know each other at all. But all that shit became super interesting to me. I did a long form video on YouTube, and I have a follow-up that I want to do as well, which I can't, again, talk about here because I don't feel like we have the same freedom here, I don't think.
My question is, how did you come to that guy's name?
Somebody posted it on TikTok, on a comment of mine. Why aren't you looking into this individual? And so I went and Googled that name, and I'm like, oh shit! Like because I do remember a little bit about that story. So that's how I stumbled upon the name. And like I said, when I stumbled upon it, I didn't really think there was going to be a connection. Now, yes, the military guy, the Army, retired, ex-military, actually, he discharged from the Army. His best friend, I don't even know if I want to name his name. His best friend came on a podcast like this kind of thing and told somebody that he personally believed that law enforcement believed possibly that he was involved in the Idaho 4 murders, and that was possibly one of the reasons why he was shot and killed, is because they were a little overzealous, thinking he was related to the murders. So now I'm saying, this isn't just me asking the question. His best friend said, I think they suspected him of possibly being involved in the Idaho 4 murders. So now it's not just me. It's not like I'm just being irresponsible and saying, well, could he have been involved? Because apparently his best friend thinks law enforcement also suspected that. And also pointed out that his cell phone had been wiped and put on the kitchen counter, which is interesting. That came from his best friend's mouth. His best friend also said there was no furniture in this guy's apartment. When the family went to this he was 36 at the time. When they went to his apartment where he was supposed to be staying, there was no bed and there was no dresser. I was like, how the hell did that even happen? Which led me to ask the question, was he really living there? Because I really don't think law enforcement's going to come in and take his bed and take his dresser, and that's not going to get caught on film. I would suspect if there really was no bed and no dresser there, that there never was. And so then the question is, was he just crashing on the floor? To which somebody said, get your facts right, you're a moron. He was living there with his girlfriend. And I'm like, I don't know the facts. I'm asking questions. Why, if he's living there, does he not have a bed and he does not have a dresser? So I'm just asking questions at this point. But I get a lot of flack from people saying that I'm asking inappropriate questions. He has nothing to do. Maybe BK did the dog skinning, but not military guy. Yeah, I'm not sure. Again, I'm asking questions. I feel like it's proper to ask questions and follow up on things. And if it turns out that there's no connection, then that's great. I'm fine with that. You know, if it turns out Bryan Kohberger did the whole thing by himself in 15 minutes, I'm okay with that as well. Like somebody said, accused me of being a Bryan Kohberger fan. Oh, here we go, another supporter of Bryan Kohberger and a fan. And I'm like, I'm just asking questions. I'm interested in the case. It's fascinating. I will tell you this. I genuinely and generally, both things, genuinely and generally, distrust law enforcement, the media, and officials. They lie all the time. I feel it's a common thing. Law enforcement lies all the time. Media lies all the time. They withhold information. They don't tell people the facts, which is why I have a big distrust of law enforcement. So when you start seeing shenanigans happening in a case, I'm critical, and my eye is mostly on what are they not telling us? And that's why it gets interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. I just think that especially because this guy isn't here to defend himself, right? Like, no. I think people are especially sensitive about that guy because he's not here to defend himself.
And I understand that. Yeah. I understand that, and I feel, again, I have mixed emotions. What I feel is, Brian Thompson, who was, killed in the United Healthcare, he has children, right? And so I could be shamed into not talking about him as well. That guy has children. Shame on you. His kids have to hear you talking about that stuff. I'm not going to stop talking about the news because somebody might be hurt. Yes, people's feelings are going to get hurt. It's part of true crime. It's just, it is what it is. And like this guy's best friend who's being accused of, not accused, I didn't accuse him, the questions, he said he eventually had to turn off social media because he just couldn't handle it. And that's great. Like, if he has to shut down social media and stay away from it because he doesn't want to hear the noise, that's great. But I'm just, again, I am not intentionally trying to hurt anyone. And if you draw the line of, if you could potentially hurt the children's, about talking about their dad, and you could hurt somebody who's a brother or a sister, and you don't understand the toy, I can't stop talking about the news because somebody might get their feelings hurt. We live in a society where it's impossible to not hurt somebody's feelings. Everyone's got their feelings hurt for something. And I'm not trying to be insensitive. I will do my best to try not to hurt someone's feelings, but I'm also not going to stop reporting things because somebody somewhere might be offended by it. I can't.
I do understand that. I just think we have to be responsible about stuff like this, right? Like, when we go out there and say, and we name a name, like Luigi's cousin or whatever getting named and his picture getting out there,
right?
And then all his stuff being scrubbed. Do you know why it was scrubbed? Because he's probably getting harassed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So when you put a name out there, once it's out there, and you cannot control what some of these crazy people on the internet are going to do. And if you can't, it's one thing to say, like, if you, like in the case of BK and BK, if you could find a connection between them, right? Or if you could find a connection between him and the victims, that's a little different. It's still kind of iffy, but nobody in 2.5 years has been able to come up with or find a connection between the two BKs or the second BK and the victims.
And that's
2.5 years.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. For me, it's new, and I feel like I'm getting close to making that connection. It may not happen. I'm not done researching. I feel like I'm getting close. If I make the connection, do you think I should be quiet about it and not point out the connection that everybody missed if I find it? If it doesn't get there, I'll also be the first to say, I have looked and looked and looked, and I can't put a connection between the two of them. Again, that doesn't mean that they're not connected, but it means I can't find it. So I would say that as well. But do you think I should shut my mouth if I find that connection?
Hey, listen, here's an example. And Lady Capulet just came into the comments, and we were involved in this. So we figured out that one of the letters, someone claiming that Luigi had written them, we found some pretty solid evidence that it was faked, right? Mm-hmm. And I talked about, like, do I want to talk about this publicly? Do I want to? And we agreed that if we talked about it, it had to be done in a way where the person wasn't named, that, we made it clear that this isn't a malicious person. We don't want the name out there. And so you just I think you have to take it by a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And you just have to ask yourself, is this worth potentially ruining somebody's life? Because it really could. Look at the two kids, the two frat brothers, mm-hmm. that were brought up in that 4chan post. Yeah. To this day, they're still harassed about this. Yeah, they're never going to escape that.
I think the bottom, I totally understand. I think the bottom line is all of us, you, me, everyone has to make that determination for themselves on where they feel comfortable with reporting or not reporting, right? And it's going to be a different line for everybody. So what I'm trying not to do is shame people because they said something more than I would say, or because they won't say what I will say. But like, I have my own boundaries, right? For example, I just give a quick example. When I was talking about the mother that was in Lewiston and in Pennsylvania, I could tell you the exact address where she lives. I don't feel responsible doing that. I don't think it's necessary for the story. I think it's good enough for people to know that she lives in that city. But do I need to post on the internet, hey everybody, here's the address if you want to go knock on our door and go see her? That would be irresponsible. But again, all of us who are researching have to ask ourselves where we're drawing that line. I don't want to cross that line. The only time I would list an address would be where the address was critical in understanding what happened. It's good enough to know if they lived 2 blocks from each other. That's good enough. Like, I don't have to list the house numbers, right? But again, house numbers of the King residence in the Bryan Kohberger thing is all over the internet. House numbers of where the parents lived in Pennsylvania are all over the internet and reported by mainstream media. So again, you have to ask yourself, is it okay for them to continue to list addresses? Am I not supposed to do it if they're doing it? Like, everyone has to ask themselves where they feel comfortable in that thing. So, and not everybody's going to agree. And some people are going to say, I go too far, and you know, or you don't go far enough, and it's just something we all have to wrestle with.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone has to come up with their own boundaries and their own line.
Yeah. So like I said, I mean, my feeling is, I want people to have freedom to talk and say and ask questions that are on their mind, and not be shamed for asking questions. I'm one of those people that feels like nobody should be ashamed of a question. But that's just me. But anyways, for what it's worth, I appreciate the discussion about it. And I think that I will do my best to report things that I feel comfortable reporting, and it will be different lines for different people. And again, if people, unfortunately, if people don't like how far I go, then they should not follow me. That's just the rule of thumb, and hopefully, of course, they don't hurt anybody unintentionally. But again, it's impossible not to break a few eggs when you're reporting things. So I don't know. We beat that to death, I guess. But yeah, I understand. By the way, crazy in the comments that it sometimes you can I mean, I sometimes feel ashamed asking a question too, but you have to ask the question sometimes, because it's just like this question is not going to leave my head. So I'm going to ask, like, is this a thing? Like, maybe I have to have more of a filter. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it really is just you have to just take it as it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of trial by fire, I think, is the word I'm looking for, the phrase I'm looking for.
What I feel like I've been accused of, I'm getting a much thicker skin in my old age, but what I feel like I'm getting accused of and hurts sometimes is people who say that I'm making statements just to be salacious and just to get hits and just to get traction on a video, and I don't believe what I'm saying, or that I'm making shit up just to create views. And that is never the case with me. If I'm making a comment, it's true. I may word something, because TikTok is an attention-getting device. You need to get the user's attention to watch your video in the first 2 seconds, or they're going to scroll to the next person. So yes, sometimes your lead-in sounds a little salacious, but I never try to make shit up. I always try to report legitimate questions, and not for the sake of just like, I'm going to say something crazy and make everyone like. I just don't do that. So that's me. I want to make a promise to those who do follow me. I never intentionally put something out there that I feel is wrong or not really my true feeling just so I can get hits or views. That's not my thing.
And I believe that. But there are some people out there that do that. And I think
Sure.
saying somebody, oh, you're just doing it for clout, I think that's reductive.
Yeah.
Right? That's just the go-to.
Yeah. I agree. And it's a shame, and like so many weird things. Like, I know I'm off on a tangent, and probably nobody came here to listen to this tonight, so I do apologize, because like I know a lot of people come here to listen to Luigi, and we're not talking to Luigi. And this is all rambling, but this is what I do with my hour, right? I do an hour Wednesday and Friday, and sometimes I just go and speak what's on my mind. One of the things that bothers me is people who are also doing this comment about the whole people that have YouTube channels that are monetized, or TikTok channels that have gotten to the point where they can monetize, and they'll say, "Well, I'm not going to listen to anything from somebody who's getting monetized incentive to talk." And I'm like, So you mean like mainstream media that has commercials on and are getting paid to tell you a certain story, or or the prosecution who's getting paid to prosecute someone? Like, again, where do you draw the line? You're okay taking paid officials and paid people who get paid to make a case and to tell you the facts, and you're okay with it in some cases, but you're not okay with it if somebody monetizes YouTube. Like, I don't even understand that kind of stuff. But this mentality of like, we're going to discredit anyone who throws an ad on a TikTok video or whatever because they're making money off of it, so they're just doing it to make money. So is mainstream media. Where are you drawing the line? Like, I don't understand it, but that's just me. Side tangent.
I get that. Excuse me. Sorry. Woo. So sorry. Woo, baby.
Yeah, I get yawning every time I get on the camera.
Crazy and Weird says, what did she say? Is it normal, or it's normal for cases, especially federal, to have delays? It is. I want to be clear about that. And it's also, I can remember someone coming into my comments saying, if they had evidence, they would have indicted him by now. No, they wouldn't. Not necessarily at all. And listen, Bryan Kohberger, granted, it was just state charges. That took almost 8 months. Almost 8 months. And in a case like this, just like in a case like Kohberger, they want to make sure that this is appeal proof, meaning they need to make sure everything is locked down so that if he's not guilty, if he's found not guilty or found guilty, there's less of a chance of an appeal. So just because they're pushing back, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could mean that they don't have certain information yet, which is not on them.
There's a lot of, there's a million reasons why it can be delayed. It can be somebody's sick, somebody had a previous engagement. They need to wrap up another case before they can finish this. There's a million different reasons why something can be delayed that have nothing to do with presumption of they don't have a case. They don't have it's just like literally like, our assistant is going to be out for 2 weeks on a wedding thing. Can we have another couple of weeks so that our assistant can help us put our stuff together? Like, it could be something like that. We don't necessarily know what the delay is.
It could be a health issue. It could be a bunch of different things. Yeah. Especially with the ghost weapon and how, this is why when people say, oh, they planted it. If they're going to plant something, why would they plant a weapon where the ballistics, like, there's still so much unknown about ballistics. Like, the ballistics on a ghost weapon are, they're iffy. So if they're going to plant it, why are they going to plant a ghost gun?
Yeah.
And how would they have known that, that it would say in the letter that this was a CAD, How would they know it was going to be a ghost gun in the first place?
The difficulty, by the way, I want to, for the last 5 minutes or so of this, I want to bring up another thing too. So I started watching a Netflix series that came out recently, a new 2025 special on O.J. Simpson, right?
Oh yeah, I heard that was great.
Oh my gosh. Like, over and over and over again, they show in those videos, that 4-part series or whatever it is, things that never made it into court. And I'm absolutely blown away at the things that weren't allowed to be shown in court for various reasons, or weren't followed up on, or weren't looked into. It is stunning. And where I'm going with that is this. There are people who believe, I'm just going to wait until this case is over to find out what happened. And when the authorities tell me what happened, that's what happened. You have no idea how bad the legal system is in times. The jury doesn't really see all the facts. The jury sees the facts that are allowed into court, and you'd be stunned at the stuff that they're not allowed to see. I can tell you cases that are absolutely crazy. Like, just real quick, a woman who killed her husband said that she thought he was a burglar, shot him when he came into her own home, said she thought he was a burglar, and then you found out later that she'd done that to her previous husband as well. Same scenario. He broke in, she shot and killed him. The jury was not allowed to hear that she'd done it before. They didn't consider it relevant and would taint the jury's opinion in the other case. How the hell does any rational person think it's not relevant to know that the same scenario happened twice? right? But they determined, nope, the jury doesn't need to know that this has happened to her again. She just had bad luck the first time. She had bad luck the second time. It's prejudicial for them to find out she's done it before. You'd be stunned to find out what doesn't make it into court. So when you get the final verdict, you're not sure still if that's really what happened.
Yeah, and the other thing people need to understand is, well, why don't we know this, or why haven't we seen that? He does have a right to a fair trial, and they have to be very careful about what they put out there. Like they can't put CCTV footage of him if they have a clear shot of his face. They can't do that. They can't put it out in the press. He's not going to get a fair trial.
Yeah.
So it's a slippery slope about what people can put out there and what you can know. And like the whole bit about this woman who did this in her previous marriage, I'm sure that that was a legal thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can't open that door. Right?
Yeah,
like
and again,
it's going to be a fair trial.
Right. And my point behind all that is just that this is why, in my opinion, these cases are still interesting to talk about even after the verdict, because sometimes going back over the case and going, hey, wait a minute. Before the trial began, we knew X, Y, and Z, and it was reported in ABC News and CBS News. It was reported on CNN, and that never got into the court. How did it not get into the court? How is that not relevant? It was reported by every mainstream media. So there'll still be talk after the case is over about how the hell did we all know that this happened and the jury didn't get told any of that. It'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm going to go live tonight to talk about the surveillance video and the CCTV. I just made a video about it. People can go look at the video, and I want to go live tonight to talk about it. You're welcome to pop over.
Yeah, I'd love to, and I need to do that. It's funny because like I said last time, I tend to, after a live is over, I tend to need to decompress because I'm not really comfortable on camera and all these things, and so it's a stressful event for me to do in a lot of ways, and so I always feel like I have to decompress afterwards, right? So it's hard for me to jump off of one live and right into another live when I feel like I need to take a break. I need to have a drink. I need to decompress a little, So you going live right after me makes it a little challenging for that, but I certainly want to get in there. Do you go live other nights other than Wednesdays and Fridays where I can join you on a night that I'm not doing my own live?
Yeah, it really just depends on my mood, to be honest. Yeah. I'm a fly by the seat of the pants person. I also have ADHD, so it's very hard for me to say I'm going to do this on Wednesdays. I cannot lock myself into things.
Yeah, sure.
Because of my ADHD. So I just sort of do it. I do it when there's something to talk about, where it's just not going to be regurgitated nonsense.
And I will make a promise to you on something that if I come on your live and you invite me up, I will not talk as much as I talk on my own live, right? So I will respect it's your live. I talk the hell out of things because it's my live kind of thing. But if I'm on your show, I'm not gonna dominate your conversation.
I would love it. That's the point. That's the point of discourse, and it's good to have people up. If you have everyone who agrees, it's boring.
Right. True.
And you don't learn anything.
Right.
So talk away. I'm perfectly fine with that. And I'm perfectly fine with having anybody in my box as long as they're respectful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
as a side thought before I wrap up tonight, because I'm getting ready to wrap up here. That's one of the things I've said for a while is, as Americans, we've gotten pretty bad at communicating. We don't seem to know how to handle conflict well and how to handle differences of opinions. And it's a skill, I think, that needs to be reestablished. A lot of us need to work on figuring out how to disagree respectfully to each other. And we do. I think we do a pretty good job. But a lot of people just they get too nervous. They shout. They shoot each other down, and it takes a lot of skill to try to be respectful of each other when you have differences of opinions. But
yeah, like Lady Capulet said, differing opinions often will lead to answers. Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Correct.
And again, I will say this: I don't have a dog in the fight. I have theories and I have questions, and when I have a crazy theory, I like to keep running that theory down until it's proven to be not true. And when it's proven to be not true, it's okay. Like if I was wrong, I was wrong. I have no problem admitting that, hey, my theory was wrong. Like I looked at it and looked at it and looked at it, and here's where it broke me. Or I realized it can't be what I thought it was or what I was theorizing. And I'll admit that. I have no problem with that. So
Yeah, it's like being able to admit you were wrong. It like as long when you're not afraid to say, "Oh, I was wrong," it just makes discourse that much easier.
yeah.
Like you can't you just can't get your ego involved here in these sorts of things, you know?
Yeah. Well, I super appreciate again you coming in and helping me have somebody to talk to. It makes it a lot easier to do a live when you have someone to talk to. So I appreciate that as always, and your corrections and insights on the Kohberger thing is very helpful as well. I want to last wrap up by telling people and reminding you that if you came in late and you want to see the whole show, I don't know if show is the right word. If you want to see the whole live, I do post it on YouTube after the live is over. It takes a couple of hours for me to be able to fully download the video and repost it, but it will be up on our YouTube channel, Devil's Advocates on YouTube. Also, it's front page of our website, devilsadvocates.info. So if you would like to check that out afterwards because you missed part of that, you can always check it out there after a couple hours after the live. Any parting thoughts, character, before we say goodnight?
Uh let's see. The Idaho case is it's a rabbit hole. It really is. So if you're kind of, there's not a lot going on with Luigi and you've gotten the bug, so to speak, look into the Idaho case because you'll sharpen your teeth on that. And if you're really interested in this kind of stuff, like, the best thing to do is to watch lives, just talk to people,
Yeah.
and but be careful and mindful of the content that you consume.
Yes.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
And I'm going live right after this to talk about surveillance.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Luigi and surveillance. So if you want to come over to my live, everybody's welcome to come over to my live right after this.
And as a parting thought, my last parting thought is along what you just said. Take care of your mental health. I've had someone tell me who followed my channel on a regular basis, hey, I just want you to know I've got to step away from this. It's causing me a huge amount of stress to think about it every day and to debate the questions every day. And I want you to know it's not that I disrespect what you're doing. It's becoming unhealthy for me. By all means, if this becomes unhealthy for you, step away. We're going to continue to cover it. We'll be here when you get back if you decide to get back. But if you need a break, take that mental break. It's overwhelming to some people, and everybody needs to recharge from time to time. So please don't burn out on this stuff like that. If it's starting to get to you, you're having sleepless nights, you're getting spun up because everybody's making you angry talking about it. Step away, take that break.
Yeah, if you find yourself getting angry at something people say, you need to take a step away because you're too invested.
Yeah. All right. Thanks to everyone again. Check out Character when she goes live. If you're not following her already, so she looks like she's going to be going here right after this. I'm going to shut this down, get this posted in a couple of hours, and maybe I'll jump on your live if I recoup and you're still going.
Great. We'd love to have you.
Okay, great. Have a good evening.
You too.